Chapter 1. Kyon Virus. From Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. The Kyon virus, also known as KV Wereflu or the Affliction, is a sudden-onset viral infectious disease that attacks the entire body, transforming the muscular and skeletal structures of the host. Typically, the first signs of KV begin with extreme muscle and joint pain and a temporary loss of equilibrium, followed by the development of canine-like features. Symptoms include excessive body hair, unnaturally vibrant colored eyes, lupin, snout, sharp fang-like teeth, overdeveloped musculature, clawed hands and feet, and preternatural strength. There may be a loss of inhibitions in the afflicted, and in some cases, KV may cause extreme aggressive behavior. The Kyon virus manifests in hosts in a variety of ways, leading to the three-tiered classification of the Hound, feral, and Werebeast. For further classification information, see Lowell. See the Werewolf Whisperer. See Xochitl Magaña. No known cure for the Kyon virus exists, nor can the symptoms be treated. Is estimated at the initial outbreak CK day, 1 in 20 Californians contracted the disease. Arms and legs pumping, lungs burning, Lowell sprinted up the Beverly Hill Street due north toward Sunset Boulevard. I hate when they don't listen to me. Xochitl Magaña, her long blonde hair whipping her cheeks, ran hard on the parallel sidewalk and cursed loudly in Spanish. The awkward weight of her Remington 12-gauge forced Xochitl to lag just a few feet behind Lucy. A great runner, Xochitl was obviously furious she hadn't caught up to Jimmy Stanton and Fat Dan Walters yet, but the shotgun was a necessity in case young Jimmy decided to bite his neighbor's face off. Why won't Jimmy listen to you? Xochitl hurled the question at her friend. He thinks it's a game, Lucy replied between sharp breaths, exasperated. Jimmy chases Dan. We chased Jimmy. To a wereboy, it's hilarious. Fat Dan Walters knew the neighborhood inconveniently well, and had managed to elude Jimmy Stanton for the better part of half an hour, ducking behind fences and hiding in the long deserted alleys reserved for the Beverly Hills trash cans. Unable to shake Jimmy, Fat Dan disappeared behind the tall cypress trees, partitioning off a mansion under renovation. They'd come halfway up Sierra Drive, and Lucy was sure Jimmy's parents had alerted the Beverly Hills Police Department by now. Keep after him. Lucy crossed the lawn at a wind sprint, leaving Xochitl to pick up her pace as well. The shaggy teenage boy ahead of them tore over the newly poured concrete foundation, leaving well-defined tracks, a narrow human foot with deep impressions accounting for the pads of 4 toes and deep gouges made by the extended claws. Fat Dan, a 30-something man with a beer belly and jowls of pudding, was nearing a heart attack, Lucy feared. Lucy pushed herself harder, seeing Fat Dan fall to his hands and knees by the back fence of the property. Don't, man. Just please don't, Fat Dan gasped. I don't care about the cat. Please don't. He put up one weak hand. Off. Jimmy, off. Lucy skidded to a stop and scrutinized the boy. Jimmy Stanton stood still, his gangly form taut as if ready to leap. Teenage acne splotched his pale complexion, and his thin face was flushed from running. His wide mouth opened slightly as if tasting the air. He revealed small, but very sharp-looking canines. The wereboy's arms were exceptionally long, forearms poking halfway out from the sleeves of his plaid shirt. His hands were covered with silky brown tufts, and his fingers tapered into long, hard, claw-like nails. His skinny jeans showed signs of extreme wear, scuffed and ripped, though Lucy wasn't sure if that was because Jimmy played rough or because the designer had favored the lived-in look. Jimmy shook his brown mane and let a chilling howl rip through the silence. Show off. Xochitl racked her shotgun. Unlike Lucy, she was not breathing hard, just having hit her stride. Jimmy, to me, Lucy shouted. Heel, Jimmy. Heel. The boy's naturally hazel eyes glowed amber, and he huffed with exaggerated irritation. Hey, gordito. Xochitl shouted to Fat Dan. Roll to me, you big tub of lard. Her eyes still on Jimmy, Lucy stifled a smirk as Fat Dan curved toward Xochitl in a lumbered crawl. He moved with the grace of a dung beetle. They'd just met Fat Dan Walters, but he'd made an unforgettable impression, arriving at the Stantons' mansion during a training session to accuse young Jimmy of eating his mother's cat. Lucy had seen more rational tantrums from 4-year-olds. No wonder Jimmy had flipped out and chased after him. Jimmy, to me. Lucy pointed to the ground in front of her. The boy started toward her, head down and dragging his feet. Bishvidi! A strident voice bellowed from the street, startling all four of them. Pinch cops. Xochitl spat on the ground, barely missing Fat Dan. Now they show up. I carajo. Useless. Ms. Lowell? Ms. Magaña? Is everything under control? The officer stepped onto the lawn from behind the tall front hedges and returned his taser to his utility belt. Dr. Stanton called. She and her husband reported you were chasing down a hound by Beverly Gardens Park. I want to report a wild, ow. Fat Dan shut his mouth as Xochitl's boot ground down on his hand. Pardon me, she said sweetly. My bad. Fat Dan cradled his bruised hand and rose slowly. His baby blue t-shirt with the big-eyed cartoon horse looked damp with enormous sweat patches. Xochitl took an obvious step away from him. I hate bronies. We're good. Thanks, Lucy told the officer, distracting him from Fat Dan, and closed a leather collar around Jimmy's neck. Rebellious teenagers. What are you gonna do? A second Bishvidi officer made her way to the back lawn where Lucy and Xochitl now congregated with Jimmy Stanton and Fat Dan. Dan Walters. The officer addressed the man, who was quietly shaking. You live on North Maple? Next to Dr. and Mr. Stanton. Fat Dan looked at her gratefully and inched away from Xochitl toward the officers. Did you ever find your mother's cat? The female officer asked with surprising interest. Lucy looked at Fat Dan sharply. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know anymore. Sweat streamed down Fat Dan's face and his voice cracked. Lucy thought he might rupture something. He stared at the ground and shook his head. Well, if we are done here, we are going to take young Jimmy back home. Maybe Dan can get a lift from you, officer. Lucy peeked at her nameplate. Sharon. Officer Sharon. She gestured toward Fat Dan with her free hand. He's not looking so good. And by the way, if you have time, why don't you stop by Greystone later? We're doing a pet parent seminar up at the mansion this afternoon. Understanding and training your hound. Lucy smiled and fastened the clasp of her leash on Jimmy's collar. Bring friends, Xochitl added. Hey, that's great. Officer Sharon looked eager. If I come, will you sign a copy of your handbook? The male officer looked less enthused and made himself busy with Fat Dan, respectfully calling him Mr. Walters, and inquiring about his mother's health. Lucy gave Jimmy's lead a sharp tug. Let's go. Her voice was higher and more sing-songy. Now that the immediate danger had passed, Lucy went right back into trainer mode. The officers directed Fat Dan to their cruiser, giving polite nods to Lucy and Xochitl. Lucy noticed the male officer's eyes linger on Zoki's shotgun just a moment too long. Maybe we should get badges, Lucy said thoughtfully as she and Xochitl walked Jimmy down Carmelita toward North Maple. Xochitl looked at her with a smirk, but didn't bother to say it. I'm just saying sometimes if the cops aren't friendlies they could freak about the shotgun if they don't recognize us. Long gun open carry is not prohibited as of 20 months ago. Read your federal Werebeasts defense mandate again, chica. Xochitl switched the Remington to her other shoulder. Pendejos are lucky I keep the semi-automatic in the trunk. Pizza after we drop off Jimmy? Lucy yanked on Jimmy's leash to stop him from pulling. Don't trample on the grass, wolf boy. You can use the can at home. I'm not picking up after you. Jimmy made a face and took his hands away from his belt. The Stanton's place on North Maple Drive was a Mediterranean-style mansion. Built, according to Dr. Stanton, in the 1920s, the Stantons had retrofitted the 3,500 square foot, 4-bedroom home last year after Jimmy had shown signs of the Kyon virus. Lucy considered the human-sized doggy doors in the garage and the den a waste of money. Xochitl had noted the built-in self-feeder in the kitchen, filled to the brim with hound chow, and the strategically placed perpetual water fountains. At least he has fresh water. Xochitl had sneered and checked the cupboards for chocolate, onions and any other food theoretically hazardous to a hound. So, are you going to tell them Jimmy isn't a hound? Xochitl looked at Lucy, who was coaching Jimmy to heel by her side and walk with a loose leash instead of pulling. Yeah, have to. Lucy combed her fingers through her hair, painfully catching a few red strands on the buckles of her leather wrist cuff. She winced. He's a feral, no doubt in my mind. She pointed to Jimmy, who was unsuccessfully working on opening the gate to his front yard. A group of lady speedwalkers raced by. Their leader, a fit white-haired Beverly Hills matron sporting a leathery tan, waved to Lucy and Xochitl with great enthusiasm. "Hi, girls," the rail-thin lady shouted and smiled a big perfect smile. "Hello, Mrs. Cyperstein." Lucy returned the wave. "My Maydell has been so good. No more counter-surfing." Mrs. Cyperstein gave them a double thumbs up. "You just have to get the Werewolf Whisperer. The girls saved my life," she instructed her gaggle of followers. "Thanks for the endorsement," Lucy shouted back to the passing throng. "Have a Werebeasts-free day." "Really? Have a Werebeasts-free day?" Xochitl asked, shaking her head slowly. "Is that your idea of PR?" Feeling self-conscious, Lucy returned her full attention to Jimmy. "He is so independent. He doesn't even look to the human for help. Not at all. Like a dog, more like a wolf. That's clearly feral behavior. His parents are gonna freak." As if on cue, Dr. Stanton and her husband Frank galloped down the garden path, and Xochitl bit back her response. "Oh, thank goodness you caught Jimmy." Dr. Stanton threw her arms around the boy exuberantly. Jimmy struggled in his mother's embrace. "No prob." Lucy cocked her head to the side. "Dr. Stanton? Maggie, we talked about how you can't smother him. He really doesn't like hugs. Hugging makes you feel better. It makes him feel trapped." Dr. Maggie Stanton backed away and looked at her husband. "So many rules," Frank Stanton interjected for his wife's benefit. "Common sense, really." Xochitl had lost her patience with the Stantons right around hour 2 of their 3-hour in-home training session, and the unexpected jog clearly hadn't improved her mood. "Let's discuss this some more over coffee," Maggie Stanton suggested, sounding tense. A short while later, Lucy settled back into the Stantons' bleached snakeskin living room couch and ran a hand over the unusually soft scales. Unimpressed, Xochitl had made herself comfortable on the arm of the couch, balancing Dr. Maggie Stanton's fancy china cup. Limoges, the woman had pointed out, precariously on her knee. Lucy thought she and her partner looked out of place in the tastefully furnished great room. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a pristine garden, softening the stark design of the ultra-modern interior. Lucy would never have guessed that the sharp edges and hard black and white of the inside of the house could have complemented the stunning Mediterranean outside, but it worked somehow. "Postmodern chiaroscuro," Frank Stanton said, glancing around his home. "I'm a designer." "He's so modest," Maggie Stanton cut in. "Frank is brilliant. Brilliant." Lucy looked down at her worn camo pants and black Doc Martens. The laces were fraying a bit, she noted. Lucy signaled to Jimmy with her hand. The leather brace on her forearm was strapped tight and made it difficult to turn the wrist smoothly. "No point in freaking people out with your wrist scars," Xochitl had said to her when they'd purchased the set of buckled leather bracers at the Folsom Ran fair over a year and a half ago. That was one very odd day. "Sit." Lucy matched the command to the gesture. Jimmy planted himself in front of her feet immediately. From her perch, Xochitl squeezed the training clicker to reinforce the command. "Good boy." Lucy praised Jimmy and flicked a treat toward him. The boy caught it in his mouth and chewed with exhilaration. "On your bed." Lucy directed him to the fancy dog bed by the baby grand piano in the alcove. Jimmy couldn't obey fast enough. He sped to his bed and curled up in a tight ball. Xochitl clicked again. "Now give him a treat," Lucy encouraged Frank and Maggie. Frank flipped a round cookie to Jimmy, who gobbled the treat up in a matter of seconds. "Good boy. You're a good boy." Lucy used her high-pitched training voice again. "Praise him," she told the Stantons. Maggie and Frank walked closer, cooing elaborate compliments. Maggie reached out to pet Jimmy's head, which he took as permission to get up. He yipped happily, jumped from his bed and started spinning in circles. "Are you sure Jimmy's never tried to eat anyone he's not supposed to?" Xochitl's question got an immediate response. Frank shook his head adamantly. "Never." Maggie shot out so fast and loud she actually scared Jimmy under the piano. "You sure? Really? Not even a nibble?" Xochitl wasn't about to let up. "What about that cat Fat Dan's looking for?" "Mrs. Walters has 12 cats. She's always looking for her cats. 10 years. We've lived here and not a day goes by she isn't looking for a cat," Frank scoffed. "Fat Dan seemed to have his chonies in a bunch though, and he did find that little pink collar in your front yard." Xochitl looked at Lucy, eyebrows raised. Dan is just trying to justify his existence. He wants to keep living in his mother's basement. Wouldn't surprise me if he didn't do something to the cat. The little creep. Maggie's words came fast. All right, forget about Dan and the cat. Lucy saw the conversation derailing. In front of her. If Jimmy really hasn't tried to eat anyone, that's good news. 'Cause you know once it goes that way, they don't come back. As she spoke, Lucy noticed Jimmy creeping up behind Maggie, getting ready to pounce. He's playful. Down. She interrupted herself, sending Jimmy belly down on the ground instead of hurling himself at his mother's back. Maggie and Frank Stanton spun around, shocked to see Jimmy so close. Xochitl set the delicate teacup on the side table with a clunk. I'm thinking he's a feral, Xochitl stated bluntly and shrugged her shoulders. What does that mean? Maggie Stanton sank down on the matching bleached snakeskin-covered chaise. She sounded overwhelmed. Ferals and hounds, Lucy started her usual lecture, might have similar physical characteristics, but the behavior is not the same. Hounds are like dogs, lassie, but ferals are more like wild wolves. The Stantons both looked confused. Frank bent down to pet his son's head. Think of it as a spectrum. Lucy tried to come up with an image the Stantons could understand. A double rainbow. She got up to crouch next to Jimmy and Frank. The afflicted can fall anywhere from low functioning to high functioning and from docile to violent. Each were displays a unique combination of these characteristics. Hounds and ferals need strong leadership. In the pack hierarchy, that would be the alpha. Lucy signaled Xochitl to ready their assessment toy. Jimmy has shown us he's got an aggressive streak, which means unlike some ferals he will always need a tremendous amount of supervision and continuous training. That responsibility falls to you. You must be his alpha, his leader. Maggie joined them on the floor, putting out her hand to pat Jimmy. Instead of responding to his mother, Jimmy ducked his head away and looked at the door. See, he doesn't really like that. He's ducking his head to tell you to back off. And what's more, while he's seemingly submissive now, he's turning his lip up a bit. That's aggression. I'm sorry, but you can't really trust him. A hard red ball bounced over Jimmy's head. Go get it, Xochitl called out. While surveying the tray of pastries on the dramatic white sideboard, she selected a bear claw, took a large bite and brushed the crumbs that dropped onto her crocodile-embossed black leather vest onto the floor. Lucy remembered how happy Xochitl had been to acquire the embarrassingly expensive designer piece at an online auction for a fraction of the cost. Had held up well, considering Xochitl never hesitated to join a fight, run down a whir or jump into a body of water, which she had done on 3 occasions. Xochitl was relentless, which Lucy appreciated every day. Meanwhile, young Jimmy set off after the red ball, crashing over the furniture and ripping the elaborate eggshell-colored rug. Early 17th century, Portuguese armorial, Frank Stanton had said in his proud designer voice when Lucy and Xochitl had first arrived. It's a copy of course, he had added awkwardly when Xochitl had responded with a bored yawn. Nice, Lucy had said, oblivious. But a rug like that is just an invitation for chewing. I'd get rid of all rugs and runners until Jimmy is older and has outgrown the chew impulse. Probably wishing now she'd followed Lucy's advice, Maggie Stanton looked at her Portuguese armorial rug wistfully. She put out her hand and yanked the ball from Jimmy's mouth before he could do more damage. Jimmy growled low in his throat. Maggie took a step back and bumped into Frank, who had moved forward to protect her. Jimmy, don't growl. Frank tried to sound authoritative. Tell him what you want him to do, not what you don't want him to do. His brain is much simpler now. Don't confuse him. Lucy looked directly at Maggie. And don't rip the ball out of his mouth. In an act of open defiance, Frank snatched the red ball from his wife's hand and flung it toward the sunroom. Jimmy again tore after the toy, eliciting unhappy sounds from his mother. Pinch Lobo Loco, Xochitl mumbled to herself and finished the last of her pastry. Drop it, Lucy called out. Jimmy dropped the ball and perversely wandered over to his mother for pets and praises. A young feral like him. Lucy began to speculate, watching Jimmy closely as he interacted with his mother and father. You have to exercise him every day. 2 or 3 long walks. And never let him off leash outside. My hours at work, Maggie Stanton said. I'm on call a lot and Frank travels. You have to be willing to do what it takes. Lucy looked at Xochitl searchingly. We could take him for a while. We have a 3-week boot camp at our ranch up north in Empyrean. It's nice. We've had a lot of success there. Xochitl started the hard sell. You've never even been to the ranch, but you sure can sell it. Lucy appreciated Xochitl's charismatic sales pitch and made up her mind to talk to Hannah again. It's been 2 years since K-Day. Isn't it time I finally go home? At this point a camp would be hard to manage. Frank's tone had altered. Lucy couldn't tell what had triggered the change, or if he just all of a sudden had had enough. My wife and I just don't know how to thank you for today. Mr. Stanton started walking toward the door. We learned a lot, and we appreciate how busy you must be. Lucy's eyes flicked to Xochitl, who gave a tiny shrug. Everybody said, get the Werewolf Whisperer. We couldn't stand the thought of putting him down. Frank Stanton stopped. His words hung in the air. Apparently unable to stand the silence, Maggie Stanton cleared her throat. Jimmy's part of the family. Almost like he was still our son, she said with a quiet but firm voice. Lucy saw Frank look at his wife with unadulterated hatred. Xochitl tugged on the front of her vest, doing nothing to hide the disgusted look on her face. Now that we know where everybody stands, Lucy said and returned to sit on the leather couch. Let me give you the honest truth. We've seen this before. In ferals like Jimmy. She thought about her next words carefully and decided that giving the worst case scenario was the only way to convince the father to give up his son. Mr. Stanton, keeping Jimmy would be like living with a tiger. It would be a lot of work and it could go fine for a while. But one day you will not be able to control his behavior. And that's going to be a really bad day. Lucy stopped herself from saying more. Why don't you send him to our camp? Xochitl tried to sound cheerful about the prospect. That's only a couple of hours from here. It's up in the mountains. You could visit. Let me be clear, Frank Stanton said and took a protective step forward. My son, our son will stay with us. We will take care of him. Here. He looked to Maggie for support. There's a doctor in West Hollywood who specializes in declawing and defanging hounds. You can't tell me Jimmy will be dangerous to us without his claws and teeth. You stupid son of a bitch. Lucy jumped up from the couch and stormed over to stand toe-to-toe with Frank Stanton. Why don't you amputate his fucking arms and legs while you're at it? Jimmy yipped and scrabbled under the coffee table, sending the Limoges china clattering to the floor. I think that will be all, Ms. Lowell. Maggie Stanton's silken voice rose in admonishment. Ms. Magaña? We take cash, Xochitl replied, her tone unflappable. She took Lucy's arm and pulled her partner toward the foyer. We're done helping you. Lucy walked straight to the front door, knowing she would punch Frank Stanton in the face if she as much as turned around to glance at Jimmy. Outside, the bright February sun delivered a sky so blue it seemed to mock Lucy's dark mood. She drank in the lush, sweet exotic flower scent that permeated Beverly Hills. Xochitl slammed the mission-style front door, making the hinges rattle. Cash in hand, chica. Xochitl waved a stack of bills in Lucy's face. Can't save 'em all. An enormous crash sounded from inside the house. Lucy and Xochitl made no move to turn around but continued to El Gallo, their bright orange 66 olds. Tornado. They're screwed, Xochitl said as she opened the trunk to place her shotgun next to the rest of their arsenal. Lucy crammed herself into the passenger seat and glimpsed the new voicemail alert on her phone. This is gonna to be fun, Lucy said and reluctantly tapped the call back. Chapter 2. Dr. K. Did they GV go ahead? Omega, stick to the plan. Dr. K, but Kevariety now. Omega, do what you are told. Dr. K, you are the boss, smiley face. K-Day 24 months ago. Lucy Lowell tucked into the shadows behind the white cinder block wall of Xochitl's cantina and listened. Coarse Spanglish curses pierced the night, accompanied by loud cheers and snatches of Tijuana narcopop. Vicious barking and short, pained shrieks lacerated the seedy revelry. Through holes in the camouflage canvas stretched over the parking lot's chain link fence, Lucy counted 30 East Los Locos gangbangers crowding around a shallow dogfight pit. Strewn around, discarded like trash, lay lumps of fur and flesh Lucy didn't have the stomach to focus on. Through the wall of men, Lucy caught a glimpse of a blue-nosed pit bull turning away from its opponent, a muscular pit mastiff mix. Handle your dog, Gee! A paunchy man yelled from just outside the ring. Accompanied by loud taunts, men from each side of the pit dragged their dogs back to the scratch lines. The mastiff's handler fussed at the dog's mouth, unfanging the dog's lip from its teeth. Clearly dead tired and hurt, the blue-nosed pit bull started toward the line of cages against the opposite fence. Whoa, Puta! A young man with a baseball cap turned backwards yanked the dog's collar hard, causing the pit to drop to the ground as if taking cover. From her hiding place, Lucy could see deep scratches on the pit bull's face, bite wounds bleeding on the shoulder and old burn marks seared into the fur. Lucy's stomach cramped. The dollar tacos she and her partner Gabe had devoured on their way to Echo Park threatened a hasty exit. Cabra, their favorite late-night food truck, had been parked close to the raid at Montana and Alvarado. Eddie, the owner, always included extra mango guacamole with Lucy's order. Guacamole. Shouldn't eaten. The dogfighting makes me sick enough. Why'd I chance it with a cabeza quesadilla on top of those goat tacos? Lucy breathed in slowly and directed her gaze from the hurt dog to the few stars blinking in the murky yellow sky. The lights of an airplane outshone the sliver of the waning crescent moon. She could make out the distant roar of jet engines. Bitch won't fight no more, Jeeve. The young man with the cap delivered a kick to the blue-nosed pit's side. An ugly curse cut through the tumult as a man in a form-fitting white t-shirt and dark designer jeans parted the crowd. Memo Morales, cock of the walk. Nice of you to join us. Teeth clenched, Lucy drew her sidearm and looked back down the alley. Officer Gabe Torres of the LAPD Animal Cruelty Task Force quietly crouched down next to Lucy, indicating with a nod that he too had spotted El Gallo. Her partner for 5 years, Gabe was as fierce an animal rights protector as Lucy had ever met. Both she and Gabe had risked both badge and incarceration many times as they rescued dogs from backyard dogfighting with or without departmental approval. Tonight's raid was another point of contention with their ACTF lieutenant. When the confidential informant had approached Lucy and Gabe about dogfighting behind her cantina, it had been just the break they'd been looking for. These East Los Locos had been brokering dogfights for years, but their slippery leader Memo Morales, El Gallo, always managed to ensconce the events with aggravating efficiency. Distressingly, the CI, Xochitl Magaña, had given Lucy and Gabe much more than they'd hoped for. El Gallo and his Los Locos were running guns. The dogfights, while generating tens of thousands of dollars on their own, were a mere front. Lucy and Gabe's supervisor, Lieutenant Heckman, had turned their information over to her superior, Captain Birch. Birch had taken the lead on the raid, called in SWAT, and only allowed the ACTF along as a courtesy after Lucy had begged to be involved. Lucy and Gabe had been virtually cut out of the planning despite their relentless pursuit of the East Los Locos dogfighting ring. Get rid of it, Tootie. El Gallo spat, prompting Lucy to inch forward. She could see El Gallo throw a fistful of cash at another man and stalk into the cantina through the back door. The gangbangers laughed and joked as more money changed hands. Pushing the baseball-capped banger away, the man named Tootie threw a chain around the bloodied pit bull's neck and dragged her clear of the wall of men. The exhausted dog cowered from Tootie as he tightened the chain around her neck. Small whimpers reached Lucy's ears. Just shoot it. A thin teenage boy in baggy jeans and an oversized white t-shirt approached Tootie with what looked like a high-power Browning 9mm. Nice gun. A detached part of Lucy's brain noted the semi-automatic. Calate, Flaco. Let's have some fun. Tootie yanked the chain, smashing the pit's chin into the asphalt. The sharp yowl caught the attention of the other attending locos who turned to watch Tootie's show. Gabe's hand settled on Lucy's arm and held tight. She would have bruises in the morning. Wait, he hissed. Lucy tilted her head to look directly into her partner's dark brown eyes. In a split second a struggle resolved between them. Birch's words, "You two hotheads are on thin ice," echoed in her memory. She knew Gabe remembered it, too. X the bitch, Tootie. Drunken hysteria pitched the locos' voices higher. Fuego! 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 Her eyes still locked on Gabe, Lucy knew what was happening in the parking lot. Having investigated the sad aftermath of the East Los Locos games, she knew what inevitably came next. Slowly she nodded her head and Gabe released his grip. It wasn't the plan. It wasn't even smart. Lucy rose to her full height. Her Beretta clutched firmly. Lucy shot a quick smile to Gabe. easily on the taller side of 6 feet, muscled like a professional bodybuilder. Gabe Torres looked scary as hell. Glad you're on my side, good buddy. Lucy felt calm wash down from her head to her toes. This was what she was made for. Xochitl Magaña paced nervously behind the bar of her cantina, anxiously waiting for the cops to arrive. Santa Maria, reza por me. Turning in her gangbanger boyfriend Memo was dangerous at best. I'm gonna be in deep shit if this doesn't go down right. And Miguel? No, Xochitl hissed, squashing the sprouting thought before it could ripen. This'll work. She snatched a towel from its hook and began wiping down the individual liquor bottles that lined the shelves behind the bar. El Gallo's done. Memo Morales preferred the moniker El Gallo, and fancied himself Tony Montana. Hi Joel. What's with Vados and Scarface? And like an overglorified, self-obsessed crime lord, El Gallo had exploited his relationship with Xochitl, using her bar as his headquarters, his command center for the gang's illegal operation. And I let him. But El Gallo gave her protection, something Xochitl desperately needed after her papa had died. And she had to admit, just as Memo liked having the only fair-skinned, light-eyed, natural blonde Ruka in the neighborhood, she'd initially liked the attention he'd given her. It had been hard growing up a guerra in the barrio, a place despite being Mexicana, Xochitl had never felt she truly belonged. School had been her refuge, and she'd even won an academic scholarship to UCLA. I was so close to getting out. Then everything changed. Her father had a stroke. His health rapidly deteriorated. She dropped all her classes, moved back home, took over the bar, took over care of Miguel. Back in the hood, back in the life with Memo. But Memo went too far. Gun running. There was no way Xochitl could live with herself knowing she had let this thug take over the business her papa had worked so hard to build. God, what would papa think of me now? I just wanted to keep the bar going and Miguel safe. Xochitl hated all of it. The dogfights, the guns, the East Los Locos. Memo. She shook off the flutter of nerves vibrating up and down her spine and noticed she'd been wiping off the same fifth of tequila as she carefully placed the Cuervo Gold in its proper slot between the Don Julio and Patron bottles. She caught the reflection of her cantina in the mirrored glass that backed the liquor racks lining the wall. Wood and leather tables filled the space. A 50s-style jukebox, her papa's pride and joy, played only vinyl from the 60s and 70s. Mija, there's no other music, he would tell her whenever she'd begged him to update the playlist. Various paintings of matadors and bullfights attempted to lend a Spanish flavor to the rugged bar. Xochitl's cantina had been Xochit's home since she was 6 when her father, Carlos, had left the Marine Corps, following her mother's death. And in its heyday, her papa's bar had been the favorite local hangout. The barrio cheers. By the time she was 11, Xochitl had a stepmother she couldn't stand and a new baby brother she adored. Hi Joel. In one shot, Anita went from barfly to mother. What was papa thinking? But Xochitl remembered how sad and lonely her papa had been after her mom had died. He was honorable and would never have considered not marrying the mother of his child. Carlos Magaña was the finest man Xochitl had ever known. Biting back tears, Xochitl clenched her eyes. Her papa's warm and inviting spirit echoed within every element of the cantina. I miss you, papa. For what seemed like the millionth time, Xochitl looked up to the neon Dos Equus clock hanging over the bar. 2:37 a.m.? They're late. The fights'll be over and Memo'll leave soon. He's gonna wonder why I'm still here and not waiting for him upstairs. Where the hell are they? She mumbled. Where the hell's who? Memo Morales asked. Startled, Xochitl whipped around, knocking over several liquor bottles. She barely registered the clamoring rattle of glass hitting glass as Memo, who had come in from the back without her noticing, stood behind her. Shit. Despite the frozen crush of heart-stomping anxiety, Xochitl couldn't help admire Memo's movie star looks and how his white t-shirt and jeans emphasized his strong lean build. His big, hazel eyes always took her breath away. Tonight was no different. Still the best-looking guy in the neighborhood. Who's late? Memo asked again, grabbing a beer from the cooler under the bar. How what? No one. I mean Miguel. He's late. Memo wrapped his arms around Xochitl and tugged at her rose-embroidered peasant blouse. Aye, mommy. Let the boy be. He's almost 18. A man. He began, kissing her neck. Why don't you go upstairs, put on that sexy slip thing I got you? I'm all wound up. You can help me relax. Wrinkling her nose at the smell of stale beer and dog, Xochitl shrugged Memo off. Her. What do you know about it? He's not one of your boys. Xochitl knew she shouldn't be flippant with Memo. He had a short temper and could be aggressive with her when he didn't get his way, but she couldn't help herself when it came to her little brother Miguel. She hated it when Memo thought he had any say in how Miguel was raised. She wanted to yell in Memo's face, "Stay away, Capron. He's mine." Instead she whispered, "I'm tired." Xochitl walked around to the front of the counter trying to put distance between herself and Memo. She could see in his eyes he was losing his patience. "Where's La Chota already?" Undeterred, Memo closed the gap between them and grabbed her arm, yanking her to him. "I said go upstairs and get in that pinch slip, bitch." Xochitl pulled her arm back and without thinking threw a right hook to his jaw. Instantly she felt pain shoot from her fist straight up her arm. "Ay, carajo." Shaking out the sting from her hand, Xochitl looked up and saw Memo stunned, holding the left side of his face. "Oh fuck, what did I do?" Instinctively, she began backing up toward the bar's front door to make her escape. As she turned from Memo, Xochitl heard a menacing laugh and the distinctive clicking sound of a gun being cocked. "Not bad for a little Gara bitch. Daddy teach you that?" Xochitl grabbed for the door. "Don't you fucking move, puta." Naked fear blasted through Xochitl's body, leaving her feet bolted to the floor. She had nowhere to go. If she moved, Memo would shoot her. "He's gonna shoot you anyway." Taking a chance, she slowly turned back to face Memo. He stood at close range, his gun pointed at her chest. "Oh God." Xochitl raised her hands in the air. "Please, Memo," she tried to placate him. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." "Calate," Memo growled, pacing back and forth in front of her like a wild beast about to pounce on his prey. An odd bubble of calm enveloped Xochitl, and as if locked in stasis she stood, immobile, waiting, contemplating her next move. "You think you can do this to me and not pay, bitch? I'm El Gallo." Xochitl stole a glance at the bar behind the counter. "Papa's shotgun. If I'm quick enough, I run this." Memo raged on only to suddenly cut himself off. Xochitl brought her attention back to El Gallo. He stared past her at the frosted glass window. She slowly craned her neck to follow his line of sight. A shadow moved swiftly by the front of the bar. "Hi, Joel. About damn time." She turned back to Memo, his eyes again fixed on her. Xochitl could see by the amazed and hurt look on his face that he'd puzzled out she had betrayed him. Why Memo hadn't made a move on her yet she didn't understand. She wasn't about to ask. Keeping him in her sights, she began inching her way to the bar. Xochitl had almost reached the end of the counter when Manny, a 14-year-old boy, one of Memo's lookouts, sprinted into the cantina from the kitchen. "Chief, La Chota, afuera." Memo regained his senses. "Donde?" "Everywhere. I came from the dumpsters out back," the boy answered. "Carajo." The cops didn't find the kitchen entrance. The side alley door was hidden by the dumpster enclosure. Xochitl's produce vendors constantly complained about the difficult access. "If I get out of this alive, I'm gonna move those pinch dumpsters." "Did anyone see you?" El Gallo asked the boy as he moved toward the kitchen and peeked through the swinging door. "No, Chief," the boy replied, pulling out a 9mm handgun stuffed in his pants. Like a gangster out of a movie he'd probably watched a million times. "The cops will find the kitchen door soon." Memo stepped back into the bar. Xochitl eyed El Gallo as he searched the room for another way out, revulsion churning her guts. "How did I ever get mixed up with this monster? What am I gonna do if he gets away?" Memo glanced down the hall toward the restrooms. His mouth turned up into a sly grin, and Xochitl knew he had figured out his escape. "Hijo de puta. Where's Pinch Xena Warrior Cop?" Unsure, Manny took a tentative step closer to El Gallo. Memo put up his hand, halting the boy. "Stay here, Holmes. Pinch cops can't touch you." The gang leader beat his chest with his fist and shouted in salute. "Arala. East Los. East Los." The dutiful boy soldier mimicked. "Someday this kid's gonna get himself killed by these pendejos. That will not be my Miguel." El Gallo turned back to Xochitl. "I'll deal with you later." Then he ran down the hall toward the women's restroom. Xochitl stood next to the bar, staring after Memo. There was nothing she could Do now except hope the cops would nab him crawling out the bathroom window. She looked over to Manny, who appeared lost now that his leader had ditched him. Poor kid. Doesn't even know Memo could give a shit what happens to him. Shouting and gunfire blasted from the back lot. Officer Lowell. Xochitl darted behind the bar, grabbed the Smith & Wesson 12-gauge, checked it, was loaded and readied herself. Looking up, she watched Manny cock his gun. Wait, she hissed. Manny smiled at her and ran for the back exit. Shit. Xochitl, shotgun in hand, took off after the boy. LAPD. Gabe shouted as he and Lucy burst from the shadows. Tootie, tilting a red plastic gas can, hunched over the injured pit bull. Down on the ground. Gabe followed up. Tootie froze. An incredulous roar rose from the surprised locos as Lucy rammed her full force into Tootie, taking him down and knocking the gas can from his hands. She jumped to her feet and buried her boot in Tootie's midsection. He gasped and curled in on himself. The crowd of locos reacted with indecent speed, scrambling down the alley, climbing fences, grabbing dogs and cash as they fled. A few took in the fact that all that was threatening them were two cops alone, and one of them was a woman. Like pack predators they closed in, toothy smiles flashing in the glow of the streetlights. The back door of the bar flew open. A skinny teenage boy wildly waving a handgun ran toward Gabe in a straight line. Manny! No! A screech Lucy barely recognized as belonging to Xochitl Magaña rang out from inside the hallway. Gabe clotheslined Manny effortlessly and sent his gun flying through the air. Hitting the ground, it went off, prompting other frenzied Los Locos to fire blindly in return. The sound of feet running from both sides of the alley, the whirring sound of helicopter blades overhead, the sudden warning shouts of police and ACTF overlapped with the howling and barking of dogs and hollers from Los Locos escaping over the fence. Bodies in flight and pursuit, knocked over cages, men crashing or being thrown into the chain link. The chaos all around made Lucy feel a weird calm. She noticed Flacco holding up his phone, filming the entire scene, turning his narcopop to full blast while tears flowed freely down his scrunched-up face. Freak. Near her, Gabe scooped up the injured pit bull and bolted towards the safety of the door propped open by Xochitl Magaña. You idiots weren't supposed to grab the dog. Xochitl sounded furious. Men came at him from all sides, shouting and flailing. Gabe barreled through them as if they were nothing. Screeching, Flacco raised his Browning to take aim at Gabe's back. Lucy clocked the boy in the face with her Beretta. He went straight to the ground. You fucking weasel! She spat and bent down to scoop up his gun. Someone grabbed her from behind, but she twisted out of the way, losing her grip on Flacco's 9mm. There was nowhere to go now but to follow Gabe and the pit bull through the open back entrance to Xochitl's cantina. Lucy sprinted ahead, tripped over the stoop and gracelessly crashed onto the cantina floor, cutting her hands and bruising her pride. Crap! A shot rang out, and for a moment everything seemed to slow down. Lucy saw Gabe, who'd been in front of her and was already in the room, go to his knees on the blue linoleum. He bent forward unnaturally, releasing the pit bull, who scrambled under a wooden table. Lucy lurched forward on the floor to half push and half drag Gabe out of range of the shots that were continuing through the back door. From behind the bar, Lucy heard Xochitl scream, "Stop shooting, you assholes!" The gunfire stopped. Lucy. The deep rumble of Gabe's voice took her complete focus. Something was very wrong. Gabe's face had turned pasty white and glistened with sweat. Lucy locked onto Gabe's eyes. Normally deep chocolate brown, they now glowed a mesmerizing amber. Before she could react, 5 locos burst into the room, shouting and waving their guns. Gabe sprang up, knocking Lucy on her back, and crashed into the locos with breathtaking force and speed. Gabe's already large frame now appeared monstrous, the muscles of his back and arms bulging and pulsing, his bones lengthening and cracking. Clean-shaven a moment ago, his face looked dirty with dark stubble. His hair, always cut high and tight, a remnant of his time in the service, now brushed his shoulders and rolled down his back like a messy lion's mane. Gabe roared like an animal in agony and ripped through one of the men's throats with the startling long curved claws of his bare hand. He grabbed a gangbanger with the other hand, dangling the man off the floor and shaking him by the face like a rag doll. Lucy started to black out as what felt like a massive shockwave rocked through her body. She fought to keep her eyes open. The small coherent part of her brain observed that Gabe's Kevlar vest had a small rip in the back. Even if the vest had stopped a bullet from going through, it couldn't have saved his ribs from being broken. Yet Gabe moved unencumbered with the power of 10 men. She fixated on the shaggy black layer of fur that covered her partner's head and arms. Just then he turned in profile. Large pointed fur-covered ears swiveled back like those of an aggressive dog. Razor-sharp teeth flashed in a tapered lupin jaw, and he bit down on the last gangbanger. My partner's a werewolf? Lucy convulsed as hysteria shot through her like an electric shock. SWAT! Drop your weapons! Nobody move! At that moment the SWAT team burst through the front door of the cantina. Gabe spun on the armed men ready to attack. No, Gabe! Stop! Lucy screamed the command, instinct trumping fear. Gabe hesitated and looked at her with curiosity. Holy shit! He's listening to me. SWAT! Get on the floor! An officer roared as the team closed in. LAPD! Don't shoot! Lucy yelled out and lurched ahead to put her body between Gabe and the SWAT officers. Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Lucy's voice gave out. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to squeeze sound from her throat, but her vocal cords wouldn't obey anymore and violent coughs shook her. She felt Gabe's hot breath on her neck and turned to face him slowly and deliberately. Down, Gabe! She pointed to the floor. Down! For a split second, everyone in the room stood still and watched Gabe. The massive man swayed briefly and then dropped to the floor like a puppet that had had its strings cut. Officer down. Code 33. Echo Park. North Alvarado and Clinton. Officer down. Start me additional units in medical. Code 3. Officer shot. Approach from northwest. On their way. Lucy heard the shouting but didn't comprehend the words. She crouched down beside her partner, holding him tight as convulsions racked his body. She saw blood drip to the floor. Gabe had been hit despite the Kevlar. Don't die. Don't die. You can't die. Lucy's words ran together in an incessant chant. She was lost in his pain, unable to focus, oblivious to the pandemonium all around her. Xochitl barely registered the sting of the zip ties digging into her wrists as she lifted her head from the floor to stare at Officer Lowell's partner. Lowell was cradling him in her arms, rocking him back and forth like a child. Madre de Dios! Xochitl would have crossed herself if she could have. She pried her gaze from Lowell and Torres and surveyed the room. With the exception of the officer who had radioed in assistance, SWAT circled Lowell and Torres. Some of the officers still had their guns drawn, others had them hanging at their sides, but all stood with their mouths gaping open in stunned silence. What the hell just happened? And how did Lowell stop it, him? Xochitl brought her attention back to Lowell. She looked exposed, tears running down her face as she whispered to her partner. This Lucy Lowell was not the same reserved, focused, unrelenting pain-in-the-ass Officer Lowell who had walked into Xochit's bar several months ago, pressing her for information on Los Locos. No, this woman was something different. She was nurturing, vulnerable, unprotected. And yet, she still managed to control the situation. That takes cojones. Xochitl had a new respect for the woman. She heard a loud commotion outside and craned her neck to look at the frosted glass window. A male silhouette pointed a finger in the chest of another silhouette and shouted an obvious dressing down. She couldn't make out what was being said but got the impression things hadn't gone as planned. No shit. All at once, the cops in her cantina became animated, taking up positions around the bar, guns drawn. They probably think they're next. Outside, one last command was given, and the dejected subordinate was sent off. The man turned toward the door, stopping briefly before pushing it open. Xochitl grunted, feeling the release of pressure from the middle of her back. A sudden rush of air filled her lungs, and she realized the officer who had his knee dug into her spine had stood up. She felt lightheaded as a dull ache formed at the spot. That's gonna bruise. All the cops, save Lowell and the unconscious Gabe Torres, now stood at attention. Only Xochitl watched as a lean African-American man, dressed in blues, bars on his lapel and cap on his head, entered. Must be the captain. Xochitl thought he looked to be in his mid to late 50s. As he approached the other officers, she could tell, even from where she lay, he was on the tall side. The captain stood in the middle of the cantina, staring at the spectacle of officers Lowell and Torres. Lowell, report, he said. It was eerily quiet while everyone anxiously waited for Lowell to respond, but she never took her eyes off Torres. The SWAT team eyed one another and shifted uncomfortably as the captain grew more irritated with every passing minute. Breaking ranks, a boyish-looking officer with doe eyes holstered his sidearm and double-timed it to his captain. "Captain Birch, sir. The bar is secure. Several members of East Los Locos are in custody," the officer said. "The ambulance has been called." "And what about that, Williams?" Captain Birch turned Williams toward Lowell, and Torres still huddled on the floor. Officer Williams seemed to be at a loss for words. Xochitl felt sorry for him. She didn't envy his position. "What can you say?" "Well, sir, I can't be sure, but I think Officer Torres entered the bar from the back and was hit by gunfire. So, when he was hit, well, Officer Williams stuttered. "Spit it out, Williams." "Well, he turned into a what?" "I think it was a werewolf." Williams cringed at the last word. Xochitl thought he might faint from the effort. "A what?" Birch's eyes looked as if they were about to pop out of his skull. "A werewolf." Williams whispered the words this time. Xochitl, Williams and the entire SWAT team held their breath, watching Birch in anticipation as he allowed the words to sink in. The captain's response shocked Xochitl. Instead of the confused horror she felt and suppose they all felt, Birch turned toward her, stared directly at her and burst out laughing. Birch was laughing so hard Xochitl could see tears forming in his eyes. "First Parker, now Williams. What's sweat on? Can I have some?" Birch mocked. "The officers. After tonight, I'll need it." Anger rose in Xochitl. How dare this pendejo make fun of us? "It's true." The words blasted from Xochitl's mouth before she could stop herself. She struggled to stand, her hands still tied behind her back. "We all saw something." Captain Birch stopped short and glared at her. "What?" With a last grunt, Xochitl got her feet under her, pressed her back against the bottom of the bar and pushed herself up. "I said we all saw it. Officer Torres. He became a monster. Or something." Xochitl tried to catch her breath. "He was tearing guys apart. Lowell got him to stop. Then he just went back to looking like that." She nodded toward Lowell and Torres. Captain Birch clasped his hands behind him and approached her. Xochitl took a defensive step back as Birch loomed over her with a searing stare. The counter pressed painfully against her. The same officers who had zip-tied her hands converged on her. Xochitl felt like a caged animal. With a subtle eye motion, Birch signaled to the officer nearest her, and he yanked Xochitl by the arm. "Ay pendejo, get off me." Xochitl struggled to free herself from the cop's grasp to get to Officer Lowell. The second officer moved in and grabbed her other arm, and together they dragged Xochitl toward the door. Lowell. Desperate, Xochitl jammed her body between the door and its frame. "Lucy!" Xochitl kicked, as the second officer tried to grab her legs. But with her hands tied, she had little balance. The first cop pulled her off her feet easily, allowing his colleague to seize them. She was hanging between the two men when she heard Lowell. "Wait. Let her go." Exhausted and out of breath, Xochitl twisted her body in an attempt to see Officer Lucy Lowell. She had removed her jacket and was placing it gently under her partner's head, before resting it on the floor. Lowell stood and faced Xochitl's captors. She stared them down. "I said, let her go." Still hanging between the two men, Xochitl peered up at them. Confusion mixed with fear crossed their faces. The officers relented and set Xochitl's feet on the ground. "That's right, Chota," Xochitl mocked. Lowell gingerly walked toward Captain Birch. She was favoring her left leg, and she gasped when she put too much weight on it. "Captain, this is my CI Xochitl Magaña. This is her bar," Officer Lowell said. "Officer Torres has sustained a bullet wound. We're waiting for EMTs to arrive. A CTF should secure the dogs." Captain Birch mulled over Lowell's report. He leaned into her and whispered in her ear. Lowell nodded, turned and slowly walked toward Xochitl. "Why is everyone standing around?" Birch yelled. "Do your jobs." The cantina was buzzing with activity once more. Paramedics equipped with a gurney rushed in, nearly bowling Xochitl over. Deciding it would be better to get out of the way, she waved Officer Lowell over to the bar. Lowell winced as she approached the counter. She motioned for Xochitl to turn. Around. Xochitl was confused. Lowell rolled her eyes and pulled out a pocket knife. Oh. Xochitl turned around and held her arms out as Officer Lowell swiftly cut her ties. Thanks. Xochitl rubbed her red wrists. Captain Birch wants you to give a statement down at the station. I'll see. Someone gets you there. Officer Lowell began walking toward the door. Xochitl didn't move. Wait, what about memo? I'm not sure. Just a minute. Lowell pulled her radio off her belt. Anyone? See Guillermo Morales, a.k.a. Gallo. Tell them he went out the window in the ladies' room, Xochitl said. Lowell raised her hand to quiet Xochitl and spoke into her radio again. A witness saw him escaping out the ladies' room window of Xochitl's cantina. Xochitl waited anxiously for someone to respond. There was static and then a male voice. No. Morales escaped. We have an APB out on him. What? Xochitl couldn't contain herself. She turned to the police officers, who had taken over her bar. How could you pendejos miss him? He went out the back. You were there. God damn it. From across the room Captain Birch yelled. Officer Lowell, take your CI outside. Now. Lowell pulled Xochitl toward the door. Xochitl reared on her. You said you'd get him. You said we'd be safe. Xochitl could see the shock and hurt on Lowell's face. She knew the cop had been through the ringer tonight. But she couldn't bring herself to care. Not now. Not while Memo was still out there. Oh God, Miguel. Xochitl struggled to walk. The thought of her little brother in danger was enough to bring her to her knees. But Officer Lowell had a tight grip on her and kept her from falling. Lowell stopped, transfixed on Officer Torres, who was strapped to a gurney, being wheeled out by the paramedics. Without another word, Xochitl and Lucy slowly followed behind her wounded partner into the early morning darkness. Chapter 3. Could your loved one be a feral? Need to housebreak your hound? Need Werebeast removal? You need the Werewolf Whisperer. Satisfaction guaranteed. www.werewolfwhisperer.com http://www.werewolfwhisperer.com. Hannah's almost done reading me the riot act, Lucy said, taking her mouth away from her cell phone. Xochitl turned left onto Doheny Drive and made the yakety-yak hand gesture. She's looking up the declawing doctor. Lucy adjusted the sun visor. Orala! Xochitl shouted and pointed to a quaint faux French coffee house nestled beside an upscale day spa. They have the best vanilla lattes. Xochitl pulled over and jumped out of the car, leaving Lucy to wrap up her call. The dogs miss you. Hannah's soft words drifted into Lucy's ear like spoken in a dream. Lucy gazed at the tall cypress across the street. A large crow hopped from treetop to treetop. It's time, Hannah continued when Lucy didn't respond. We'll talk later. Hannah hung up before Lucy could get out the yes caught in her throat. Feeling a burst of joy, Lucy scooted over and settled behind the wheel of the orange tornado. This is gonna be a great day. Everything is gonna be all right. Gotta keep up appearances for the folks, she said when Xochitl returned with 2 large coffees and a white paper bag. Xochitl jangled the rooster keychain, clearly reluctant to hand it over. The Werewolf Whisperer has to be in the driver's seat. Lucy shrugged as if to say, it's beyond my control. What's in the bag? Lucy asked, accepting the delicious-smelling vanilla latte gratefully. Croissants, Xochitl taunted. But you can't drive and eat croissants at the same time. Xochitl mimicked Lucy's it's beyond my control shrug. Just to be clear, chica. Xochitl handed over the keys but kept the croissant bag out of Lucy's reach. Deal's only good till Greystone. Xochitl fished only 1 croissant from the bag. Don't get too comfortable. They smell like warm butter, Lucy said, her mouth watering. Don't they though? Xochitl replied and took a careful bite. You're just afraid El Gallo will like me better, Lucy said and adjusted the rearview mirror just to be annoying. And I lo pienses, Xochitl said, patting the dash lovingly. When pigs fly. Gringa. Lucy pulled into traffic behind a white Jaguar. So, Hannah says the declawing thing is actually old news, Lucy said while Xochitl fastened her seatbelt in a hurry. West Hollywood has had a ban on declawing cats since way back in 2003. Lucy took a sip of her coffee and rode up behind the Jag, which was climbing up the hill so slowly she had to wonder if the octogenarian driving the car was in fact pedaling. Hey, following distance, Xochitl remarked. But wasn't there some bill that prohibits local government from interfering with veterinarians? We studied that in my pre-law class. Xochitl took a paper napkin from her vest pocket. Right, Lucy agreed. So then it turns out the declawing doctor was a vet. Not a people doctor. Lucy swiftly pulled around the jag and scooted into the left turn lane at Sunset Boulevard. An annoyed honk sounded from the jag. Hannah said both PETA and the ACLU got on the dock when he opened his clinic, specializing in hound accommodations. Lucy drained her coffee. Somebody firebombed the clinic Halloween night. End of story. Xochitl whistled between her teeth. Guess Jimmy's dad isn't up on the latest developments. Hannah said to let the Stantons cool off for a few days. She'll call next week and offer long-term boarding for Jimmy. By the way, Hannah says hi, Lucy said innocently as they waited at the long light. Doubt it, Xochitl said and checked the time. Sometimes I think Hannah forgets I exist. Doesn't forget to pay you. Lucy winked. The light changed and Lucy instantly blew past the corner liquor store. So, where's my croissant? I always liked that place. Xochitl pointed at a pizza parlor with a large open front and sidewalk seating. Pizza would be great right now. Lucy salivated. So where's that croissant? No croissant. Driving. Member. Xochitl looked wistfully at the pizza parlor. We'd get the best 2 a.m. pizza over there after hitting the Sunset clubs. 2 a.m. pizza? Lucy smirked. I thought you were this serious goody-goody. With your fancy scholarship in your fancy UCLA days, you partied on Sunset. Well, you can't study all the damn time when the Sunset Strip is your backyard. Xochitl grimaced. Second quarter was crazy fun, so I repeated a class or two, she said with no trace of regret. I made the dean's list my third quarter, and then, well, you know the rest. Dad got sick. Adios la uni. Hola cantina. Lucy turned onto Doheny Road, passing the Hamburger Hamlet and Sierra Towers, before winding up Loma Vista Drive. Sorry you didn't get a chance to finish, she said to her friend. Xochitl nodded. Shit happens, they said in unison, and started laughing. Greystone Mansion sat nestled in the verdant hills above Sunset Boulevard, blocked from sight by gated estates and high stone walls that reminded Lucy uncomfortably of Folsom State Prison. From Greystone Chapel in Folsom Prison to Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills. In less than 2 years. I'm moving on up. Steering El Gallo up the long curving driveway, Lucy couldn't look on the stunning estate without being impressed by its beauty and grandeur. The layout of the big square main building included several wings, many of which were topped by orange brick chimneys. The bulk of the manor seemed to have a limestone facade, with some of the gray stone that gave the estate its name making up the walls and many levels of the gardens. Lucy remembered glancing at the brochure sent by the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce when they booked the Werewolf Whisperer for their annual family and well-being expo. What does it say? She asked Xochitl, who had her nose buried in the booklet. Just a sec. Xochitl stopped flipping through the pages and stared out at the estate sprawling before them. Sorry, I'm just amazed. I went to La Uni right up the street. Never knew this was here. She shuffled back to the beginning of the book. Estate belonged to Edward Doheny, a 19th century oilman. Bad things happened. His son was murdered on the property. Xochitl looked over at Lucy and made a face. Crap. That sucks. Lucy shook her head with dismay. Bad things come knocking, whether you live in a castle or a shack. Anyway, Xochitl continued. Tudor revival. 18 acres, stables. Yule. Like this. Kennels. Tennis court, bowling alley, gatehouse, pavilion. Greenhouse, lake, waterfalls. Blah blah blah. Gorgeous. Xochitl shut the brochure. What more do you need to know? Lucy smiled at Xochitl's exaggerated brusqueness. She could tell the opulent charm of Greystone was not lost on Xochitl. She just refused to make a big deal about it. Lucy pulled up to the valet stand at the front of the large upper parking lot. Hi, we're here for the event. Lucy, Lowell, and Xochitl Magaña. She smiled broadly. I have to keep my keys, boss. The young valet's eyes got a little bigger at that request. He seemed to weigh his options and then chose to go with the authoritative and unyielding approach. I'm sorry, ladies. We park all the cars today. Greystone Mansion requires. He would have gone on if Xochitl hadn't leaned over from the passenger seat and looked right into his eyes. This, my young friend, is not a car. This is a 1966 Olds Tornado in mint condition. The original fly-ass ride. His name is El Gallo. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a business card. And this lady is Lucy Lowell, the Werewolf Whisperer. Xochitl settled into her seat again as if there was nothing else to say on the subject. The valet's bravado turned to confusion. He looked at the business card. I can't let you have the keys, boss, Lucy said again, shrugging as if the decision was out of her hands, which it sort of was. El Gallo was loaded down with a number of special toys, as Xochitl liked to call their collection of knives and firearms. Giving the keys to a stranger was out of the question. Call Mr. Sarouche from the chamber if you have any questions, Lucy suggested. In the meantime, why don't I just park it somewhere? The line behind us must be getting long. This isn't worth holding anyone up. She indicated to the two identical Mercedes SUVs that had pulled up behind her during their last few sentences. You know how people around here can be. Looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, the valet made a decisive arm gesture, directing Lucy to pull El Gallo to the edge of the lot. Good boy, Xochitl mumbled. Lucy backed El Gallo into the parking spot a little more rapidly than Xochitl would have liked, judging by the small squeak she let out when the back tires bumped against the curb. Easier to get out later. Lucy tried to appease her and grabbed the box of dog toys and the package of blue Werewolf Whisperer slip leads from the back seat. Xochitl flipped Lucy the bird. Elaborately fabricated pavilion booths lined the area, creating a miniature maze of temporary hound-centric shops. Hound treats, hound leashes, hound clothing, hound beds, hound food, hound toys. There was no end to the creativity of the offerings, though Lucy suspected many of the articles specifically designed for hounds were in fact repurposed dog items. Mr. Sarouche, head of the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce, met them at the massive double-tiered fountain set toward the back of the formal garden. Lucy had never seen such a perfectly manicured lawn, lush, greener than green and wreathed by a myriad of white roses on a second-tier slate walkway just a step up from the grass. The cascading fountain looked like something from Greek mythology. Oh, pretty. Mr. Sarouche smiled beatifically and greeted Lucy and Xochitl as if he'd known them for years. A photographer jumped out from behind a group of volunteers and snapped pictures of Sarouche and Lucy shaking hands, clearly photo-ready. Sarouche's gray curls had been brushed back into a kind of helmet. Standing close, Lucy even detected a touch of powder on the man's face. Lucy wondered if her own stick-straight copper-streaked hair would look flat in the pictures. She'd grown it out to her shoulders but hadn't had it shaped since the prison barber had buzzed it. Can that fountain be turned off? Xochitl asked after listening to Sarouche drone on about his involvement in the charitable Beverly Hills Chamber Expo. People should be able to hear Lucy during the presentation. Mr. Sarouche was obviously used to people being enchanted by a visit to Greystone and unquestionably believed himself to be charming and attractive to the ladies, judging by his meticulous grooming and expensive-looking suit. Xochitl's matter-of-fact request, while perfectly reasonable, appeared to cause him some discomfort. We can turn the fountain off when you start your class. He forced a smile. Great, thanks. Xochitl nodded and then continued in one breath. But before we start, you know we only take cash. She looked at the man calmly. Up front. Lucy cocked her head at the spontaneous change to their payment policy, but, remembering how close she'd been to leaving the Stantons without collecting payment, couldn't argue. Cash, of course. I just need to. Annoyed, Mr. Sarouche struggled with his cell phone. My assistant Nicolette will be with you in a second. Sarouche waved his arms as if performing semaphore and caught the attention of a young woman directing volunteers to the courtyard. She carefully made her way down the stone stairs and crossed the lawn with measured steps. The thin woman looked very young despite her constricting pencil skirt and sky-high Louboutins, which Lucy recognized by their red soles. Hey, look, Xochitl. Louboutins, Lucy said, eager to prove that she had in fact retained Xochitl's fashion 411. Good girl, Xochitl replied. You're not a total lost cause. Mr. Sarouche's assistant's dark hair was piled on her head in a gravity-defying chignon, and the beads of her tailored jacket sparkled in the sun. She moved with confidence and grace, swooping next to Mr. Sarouche as if she were the boss instead of the assistant. Let me introduce Nicolette Artishian, my right arm, Mr. Sarouche said, and leaned toward Nicolette, placing a familiar hand on her tiny waist. Nicolette, please make sure our Werewolf Whisperer can start on time. He nodded toward Lucy and Xochitl and then excused himself. Creepy old man, Nicolette said before Lucy could be sure Sarouche was out of earshot. A smile played across Nicolette's full lips. I know what you're thinking. Lucy dug through the box of dog toys, pulling out a can of brand new tennis balls. She tried hard not to think anything. He's okay. Nicolette handed Xochitl an envelope of cash. But I wanted to ask you something. She bit her lip. My boyfriend came down with, his whole family rejected him, and he's been living with me for a few months. Now, she searched Xochitl's face for sympathy. What are you asking? Xochitl counted the bills in the envelope, seemingly giving Nicolette only a fraction of her attention until she was satisfied the entire amount was there. He looks so. Is he still my boyfriend or do I treat him more like, a pet? Saying it out loud made the girl look very vulnerable and suddenly unsure of herself. Lucy straightened up, changing places with Xochitl, who by the look on her face was letting her imagination get the better of her. Before all of this KV business, Lucy said, keeping her voice low, would you have wondered if your dog was your pet or your boyfriend? Nicolette's paradigm shifted visibly, and she took a step back, mortified. Of course not. I'm sorry. It's no different, Lucy said. Your boyfriend, the man he was, is gone. If you want to keep taking care of him, you have to make that distinction clear in your mind. Nicolette nodded once, recovering her confident grace. Bookstew is setting up for the book signing up there. She shifted to business mode seamlessly and shuffled through her portfolio. The owner brought a couple of crates full of pre-sales for you to sign. Nicolette pointed to a tall man with Civil War-era sideburns. He stood by a long table, covered with a white tablecloth and decorated with Bookstew signage. Two volunteers fiddled with folding chairs behind the table. Bookstew. Xochitl strode over to the tall man, who was now testing a number of ink pens on a yellow pad. Lucy followed, untangling the knot of slip leads Xochitl had thrown at her. Bookstew. That's me. The man pointed to the name tag stuck to his navy t-shirt. Hello, my name is Stu, Xochitl read out loud. Okay. Hello, my name is Xochitl. This is Lucy. Nice to meet you. Can we get started? She pointed to the people lining up at the edge of the grass. Let's do it now if you're ready. Stu smiled a goofy smile at both Xochitl and Lucy. Born ready, Lucy said, slipped behind the table, took a copy of Hounds and Ferals and Werebeasts. Oh my, and wrote her name on the title page, leaving a looping ampersand in room for Xochitl's name. Xochitl breathed out sharply through her nose, but Lucy could tell she was pleased. You have to write more than your name, Xochitl teased. What are you gonna write? Lucy leaned over to peek at Xochitl's first signed page. Living La Vida Loba. And you can't steal it. Xochitl stuck her tongue out at Lucy. Enjoying the exchange, Bookstew snapped a picture of Lucy and Xochitl behind the table and typed a few lines into his phone before posting. You two are funny. You should have a TV show. I'd watch it. His grin widened. Then he turned and ushered the people at the front of the line over to Lucy and Xochitl. Let's get going, people. Soon the crowd grew large, and Lucy and Xochitl had to work quickly to keep up with the demand. Hannah's publicity blitzes for the book usually left Xochitl standing on the sidelines, which Lucy found ridiculous since she thought the real business of the Werewolf Whisperer had always been Lucy and Xochitl together. If Hannah could only understand how important Xochitl is to my life now. All Hannah saw, all most people saw, was Lucy's unique ability to control dangerous creatures. What they didn't understand, and what Lucy knew deep in her bones, was that without Xochitl there never would have been a werewolf whisperer at all. Lucy had left that prison broken in too many pieces to count. Xochitl had picked her up from that hellhole and helped her to find some kind of path to redemption. Lucy looked over as her friend joked with a young boy and his mother who had stepped up from the line to receive a book. And the hound goes, ow 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 ow. Xochitl made a wild wolf sound that drew stares. The boy giggled, and his mother shook Xochitl's hand gratefully. It's just been so hard since his sister turned, the woman explained. Thanks for making him laugh. The hour flew by as Lucy fully involved herself in answering individual questions and spending time talking to people while she signed books and passed out information about the new and improved Hannah's rescue and rehabilitation up in Empyrean. Xochitl squealed all of a sudden and almost knocked over the table trying to hug an older man in a dark suit who had come over during a lull. Bob L.B., it's been almost 2 years. How the hell have you been? Xochitl stood on her tippy toes and threw her arms around Bob's neck. He laughed and returned the hug, patting her back. You look great, kiddo. Time on the road has done you good, Bob said, adjusting his suit jacket. What are you doing here? Xochitl asked. Are you on the job? Just a little security for the expo as a favor to Mr. Sarouche. He hires my firm for big jobs on a regular basis. Used to be in and out of the country. Not anymore, of course. But we've been busy. Bob's eyes caught a movement, and he turned, almost unnoticeably shielding Xochitl's body. Paranoid much? Xochitl teased. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Bob, when did you stop shaving? Xochitl hesitated. Oh. Lucy looked up to see Bob's hand fly to his right cheek. A red scar ran along his jawline and onto his neck. He rubbed his face and nodded slightly. It's been a bear lately, kiddo, but we can talk more later. That moment, Bob's phone buzzed. Excuse me. He stepped to the side of the table, and Xochitl returned to her seat, almost bouncing. That's my papa's buddy Bob, she explained to Lucy. He helped with Miguel. Lucy acknowledged, remembering the story with a nod. Can't wait to hear his side, especially about the tattoo. Xochitl barked a short laugh. He wasn't there for that, she said, her hand involuntarily cupping her La Guerra tattoo, though it was hidden by her thin sweater. Zoc, I have to run. Bob leaned over the table for a second. Someone wanted to make an early exit and got parked in. Something about a valet throwing a fit. He waved at Lucy. Sorry, we'll have to meet later. Later, Lucy agreed and shot Xochitl a look. I think you broke the valet. Some people are so sensitive. Xochitl lisped and batted her eyelashes. Lucy laughed and got back to work. Lucy's hound training class was scheduled to close the event, and when Nicolette made the announcement, everyone gathered in the formal garden with great anticipation. Most of the guests had partaken of the plethora of food and drink offered throughout the party, had mingled with all the business prospects they'd come to schmooze, and had checked out all the booths. The majority gathered in the formal garden under outdoor heaters, squeezing around the perimeter of a roped-off square. They waited for Lucy to work her magic. The band had stopped playing, and Lucy could see them packing up their instruments in the courtyard. The crowd went silent. Lucy shrugged off her bomber jacket, though it had grown a little chilly, and stepped onto the grass. Do I have any students here today? Lucy called out and clapped her hands. A small group of people walked past the ropes and into the middle of the grass area. The group of about 10 people had their hounds on leashes. An additional 4 let their hounds go off leash. These hounds were all young men and women from the local neighborhood. Hannah had been marketing to high schools with problems lately finding parents willing and able to pay for the luxury of a well-behaved child. Lucy and Xochitl just wanted to help people, and when Hannah had sent them on the latest tour through Beverly Hills, they couldn't really see a reason to turn it down. They'd spent the last week in Beverly Hills and worked 3 jobs a day, leading up to the Greystone event. All of the clients had been hounds, with the exception of Jimmy Stanton. All the trainings had been successful, with the exception of Jimmy Stanton. Please release your hounds. As Lucy had anticipated, the corny line got a titter from the audience. She didn't have to look at Xochitl to know her eyes were rolling. The hounds all stood, politely waiting for Lucy's command. Everybody sit. Lucy gestured with her hand and all the hounds sat. From the sideline, Xochitl clicked the training clicker, reminding every hound parent to get out theirs from pockets, purses, and fanny packs. The random clicks that followed amused the audience. Treat your hound, Lucy suggested. A row of hound parents treated their seated hound with anything from bacon to cheese to bits of hot dog, which they had pulled out from little plastic baggies along with the training clicker. Lucy was happy to see so large a group follow directions so perfectly. As you can see, this is like the ballet. But if the ballerina got a cookie after every ply? The audience laughed on cue. Soon no more tutu, Lucy finished with a smirk. What you want is to start with the treats and then, little by little, get rid of the treats. Treat inflation. She pointed to a hound girl in bright green pants and a pretty cream-colored sweater. Come, Lucy said, nodding to the hound parent to let her off-leash. The hound girl ran over to Lucy eagerly. This is Courtney, Lucy introduced the young hound. The crowd applauded, causing the hound girl to shift nervously. Now sit, Lucy said firmly. The hound sat. And around. Lucy waved her hand in a circle, and Courtney hound spun around. Down. Lucy pointed her index finger at the ground. The hound stretched out on her belly, anticipating the next trick. Roll over. On Lucy's prompt, the hound girl rolled over once and then bounced up. Sit. Lucy gestured, pulled a piece of jerky from her small leather hip pouch and flipped the treat into the air for the hound girl to catch. Look at that, Lucy addressed the crowd. 6 tricks for 1 treat. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Lucy sent the hound girl back to her parents. Just a thought, parents, though it looks great, creams or whites are not good colors to dress your hound in. You don't want to worry about grass stains or mud. Just let them be comfortable. The hound girl's mother looked a little flustered but nodded and threw her hands up in a good-natured gesture of agreement. Now let's get to why we are really here. Tricks are a good way to bond with your hounds, but you're really here because you want your hound to be a happy, well-balanced part of your family. So, let's talk about socializing. Lucy signaled for the pet parents to bring all of their hounds to the circle. Xochitl joined them, handing Lucy a red volleyball. So Hannah just texted me, Xochitl hissed. There's gonna be media. She handed Lucy the ball. Apparently that annoying reporter Enrique Baldwin is here with his team. They've been taking B-roll of the event. They want to shoot the game and interview you. What do you think? Lucy felt a bit taken aback. Xochitl considered briefly. Well, Hannah sure seemed excited about it. Wait, Tevs. Tell the news guy to come up when they're playing. I can talk then. Lucy crossed into the pack of hounds, telling the hound parents to follow Xochitl back to the perimeter. The hounds circled Lucy happily, waiting for the go-ahead to play. In a lot of ways, for the past 2 years Lucy had thought hounds were just like her dogs at home, training them accordingly, but lately she had started to notice that with intense training and focused attention hounds could develop minds superior to dogs. These pampered Beverly Hills hounds, she'd noted over the last week, picked up commands fast and were able to predict certain events, like knowing that Lucy had gathered them for a game. She attributed their rapid improvement to the intense, focused time their hound parents had been spending with them after Lucy's in-home training, but she couldn't be sure. With 2 clear gestures she divided the hounds into teams, astonishing the onlookers. She threw the ball up in the air and called out, "Play ball." Then, all she had to do was get out of the way. The hounds played with abandon. Tirelessly they chased the ball, going round and round the grass. There was no goal, no way to keep score. The game was mostly an intense game of keep away, though it was clear that the hounds worked in teams. The audience seemed delighted, hanging on every step and wiggle of the exhibition game and cheering for every move. Lucy noticed Xochitl waving her arms and pointing at a dark-haired man with a mic and a crew. Enrique Baldwin. Lucy knew him from the local news, but thought he looked even shorter in person. Baldwin stepped up to Lucy and shook her hand before she had a chance to say anything. So nice to meet you. Can I call you Lucy? Baldwin wasted no time. We're all set up. We'll be going live in a sec, so watch what you say. Lucy took a step back and momentarily considered just bolting. The red light blinked on the camera, and Baldwin flashed his trademark smile. Yes, Kathy, hello to you in the studio. He paused for a second, listening, and then continued. We are here at the beautiful Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills for the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce's Special Family and Wellness Expo. He nodded, listening again. We do have a very special treat. He waved his hand toward Lucy, who just stood still and smiled stiffly, hoping it would be over soon. Meet the silver lining in our werewolf apocalypse, Lucy Lowell, the Werewolf Whisperer. He glanced at Lucy. So, Lucy, what are we looking at here? Lucy froze for a moment and watched the playing hounds. These are hounds playing a game. She could see Xochitl jumping up and down behind the camera, making a strangulation gesture. Lucy searched Enrique Baldwin's face, finding the total absence of a personality in his eyes. She took a deep breath. We trained these hounds over the last week. They have learned to be social and can be taken out in public without any problem. Would you say you've trained the hounds or the hound parents? He surprised her with the astuteness of his question, but then she spotted his producer, standing next to the camera waving a small tablet with a question written on it in bold block letters. I'd say both. It takes total commitment, but as we like to say, happy families have happy hounds. She forced a smile she knew must have looked waxen and bizarre, but couldn't stop herself. She turned away from Baldwin and called the hounds, ending the game. They ran to her and lined up in a row, each waiting to be thrown a treat before being dismissed. Applause ran through the crowd. And there you have it. Enrique Baldwin reporting from Beverly Hills. He smiled his plastic smile. Back to you in the studio, Kathy. He waved off his camera crew. That ought to do it, Enrique said and disappeared into the crowd for testimonial interviews. Lucy took a very small bow and made her way back to the table where Xochitl waited with the box of dog toys. You were great. Nicolette sounded out of breath as she sprinted up to them in her impossibly high heels. But you should get out of here. Lucy and Xochitl looked at her, puzzled. Why's that? Lucy asked, growing uncomfortable. She slipped on her bomber jacket and grabbed the box of dog toys from Xochitl. Just some, protesters, in the parking lot. Nicolette looked only slightly abashed. We'd gotten some threats before, the expo, about inviting you. Her cell rang, and she pointed a long finger, telling Lucy and Xochitl to hang on. The Anti-Werebeasts Commission? Paranut. Shun Kakna. Do something. Nicolette sounded off in a most unladylike fashion. Protesters? Let's bounce, Xochitl said, unwilling to put their safety in the smooth hands of this up-and-coming Beverly Hills business diva. Let's go round that way, Lucy said, scanning the formal garden's back wall. Behind that wall is a walkway to the old bricked-over pool. I saw it in the brochure. Without pausing, Xochitl headed straight for the stone passage half hidden on the side of the yard by the great fountain. Lucy and Xochitl didn't speak but kept an eye on their surroundings, watching people flee the area through the courtyard and up the slate stairs toward the parking lot. As Lucy and Xochitl made their way down the small stone steps to the pool house, they could hear shouting and chanting from the parking lot level. Nowhere's nowhere. Nowhere's nowhere. Nowhere's nowhere. The rhythmical chant swelled as they crossed the brick plaza and hustled to the hillside next to the Roman pool house. To hell with hounds. Not in my backyard. Werebeasts kill. Turn back the clock. No hounds or wers allowed. Get rid of the fur backs. Lucy and Xochitl climbed through the bushes, arriving slightly above the parking lot but remained hidden from sight. The lot had filled up considerably, protesters marching in droves on foot up the long driveway. The people who'd attended the event scrambled to their cars, honking and flashing their brights. Arrest the Werewolf Whisperer. No werebeastiality. No one is safe. Yeah, I'm clearly their biggest problem, Lucy said, seeing a large poster with her picture inside a red circle with a slash through it. I like that one, Xochitl said, pointing to a homemade Occupy Werewolves sign. I don't even know what that means, but I like it. Lucy raised an eyebrow. All kidding aside, we've got to get out of here. Xochitl and Lucy regarded the hundreds of people crowding the parking lot, protesters strutting about and guests trying to leave. I think Fire Road, Lucy said, considering their location. From their vantage on the hill, she could see a dirt road a few feet from the parking lot. She couldn't tell for sure, but it seemed to connect to the large driveway leading to the gargantuan estates perched above Greystone. Off-road. Xochitl's eyes sparkled. Hells yeah. Just have to get to El Gallo. Lucy pointed to a group of protesters with an "Nowhere's nowhere" splashed across their red shirts. They swarmed El Gallo, staging what looked to Lucy like an old-fashioned sit-in. Asswipes. Xochitl spat. If they as much as put a scratch on my car, voy a romperlos los boni armastas dirty hippie cuerpos. So the plan is, walk to the car, get in and drive off? Lucy asked with skepticism. Sounds like a good plan. Xochitl began to unsheath her karambit knife. No blood, Zoc, Lucy said and pulled on her worn leather ranch gloves, juggling the box of dog toys. Okie dokie. Xochitl bent down and picked up a fist-sized rock from the ground. Let's go. Lucy let out a heavy sigh. She knew in a crowd situation things could go sideways quickly, and judging by the mob pouring into the lot, this would only escalate. Lucy imagined Enrique Baldwin already saw himself accepting a Peabody Award. All she wanted was to get out without having to throw a punch. Lucy and Xochitl made their way down the hill toward El Gallo. The crowd parted reluctantly, but shooting out from the bushes, Lucy and Xochitl had the element of surprise on their side. Indiscriminate shoving helped get people out of their way faster. Lucy bonked a sitting protester on the head with the box of dog toys, taking the moment of his rising to complain as an opportunity to slip into the car and lock the door. Xochitl had made it into the driver's side without a problem, but Lucy saw she no longer carried the stone she had picked up on the hill. Lucy decided not to ask. El Gallo roared twice as if getting ready for a street race. "You fuckers better know I'm serious," Xochitl yelled and flashed her brights. Lucy worried about Xochitl just running over people, but the protesters didn't give her the chance. Provoked, they jumped up and circled the front of the car, banging on the driver and passenger side windows. "We're sluts," a man Lucy recognized as Fat Dan Walters shouted and threw himself on the hood of the car. "Splat goes the lard ass," Xochitl sang brightly to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel and threw the car in full reverse. El Gallo bounced over the curb, crushed a few saplings in his wake and flew onto the dirt road. The protesters stood in shock. No one moved for a moment, giving Xochitl the chance to straighten the car and scream down the dirt road away from Greystone and back toward the